So we're not doing the 12 o'clock talk. Talk is called The Ultimate Hack, Applying Lessons Learned from the Loss of the Titanic to Maritime Security. No, Titan. Sorry, yeah. It's still early, man. It's like the con. Got TI. Anyway, here we have Dr. John Mauger. Mauger.
Yeah.
So, and here's his talk. And this is his first talk. So please give him a round of applause. And hopefully I won't mess this up anymore. There you go.
Hey, thanks so much.
No problem.
I appreciate it. We did it off stage a second ago, so we got going. Hey, thanks for coming out. You know, the theme for DEF CON this year is access everywhere. And over the course of the next couple of minutes, I'm going to take you to the most inaccessible place here on Earth. We're going to go 3,800 meters below the surface of the North Atlantic. And when you get down that deep, communications are incredibly limited. The climate is unforgiving. And even the smallest mistake can have catastrophic consequences, as we've seen in this particular case. And so on the morning of June 18th, 2023, 5 people were bolted into the Titan capsule. Suleiman and Shahzad Dawood, Hamish Harding, Paul Nargeolet, and Stockton Rush. Later that evening, a distress alert would be sent out, and it would echo around the world over the course of the next couple of days. We would assemble a team of experts from all over the world, from Pearl Harbor to Portsmouth, and work tirelessly during the next 96 hours to try and bring about an unprecedented search and rescue effort. After the wreckage was found, a Coast Guard Marine Board of Investigation was commenced, and they recorded over hundreds of hours of video and thousands of pages of documentary evidence to try and understand what happened, what led to this catastrophe. And what we see from that evidence that they collected is the story of a maverick who pushed the envelope. And while I understand some here at DEF CON and some in the hacker community may appreciate the maverick story there, what I can tell you is that this is a cautionary tale. And it's a cautionary tale because the lessons that we've learned from Titan can be applied to other elements of the maritime industry, in particular to the issue of maritime cybersecurity. And so let me tell you my story and how this unfolded and how my experience working to ensure the safety and security and environmental responsibility of shipping over the course of the last 3 decades collided with this response in June of 2023. And so at that time, I was the Coast Guard's first district commander, and I was the search and rescue coordinator responsible for leading this unprecedented mission. So the world's oceans are divided into search and rescue, or SAR, regions. And this map that you see on the screens reflects the Coast Guard's first district SAR region. It extends 1,300 miles out to the east, where Portugal picks up search and rescue coordination responsibility. To the north, the Canadians have search and rescue coordination responsibility. And to the south, one of my colleagues at the 5th Coast Guard District has responsibility for the mission there. And the term coordinator is particularly important because on any given day, I did not have my own organic resources out there to effect search and rescue in this broad region of the ocean. Rather, myself and the team that I worked with had to leverage the resources of other partners, of industry professionals, of other mariners that were out there on the water to bring about these cases. And this case was no exception. We had a particularly strong group of partners shown with the graphic images at the bottom of this slide. But what made this case really unique was the series of challenges that we were presented with. First of all, there was a very sparse initial report just alerting to us to the fact that the Titan capsule was overdue. There was no immediate indication of harm. Second, there was no plan from the owners and operators of the Titan submersible in terms of how to proceed with any search and rescue efforts, and there was no pre-positioned equipment that was out there. You can see that where this happens, it's at least 400 miles from the nearest port. And so that time and distance problem became a real issue as we proceeded over the course of the next couple of days. And then again, as we talked about with this particular area, this particular depth, there really is only a small handful of equipment around the world that is capable of operating successfully at this depth. And so we were limited in the resources that we had at our disposal. But we caught a very lucky break early on in terms of prosecuting the search. We had a Coast Guard C-130 aircraft, long-range search and rescue aircraft, that had been pre-positioned in Newfoundland and was operating over the North Atlantic. It was there because in 1916, when the Titanic sunk, we agreed, when it hit an iceberg, we agreed as a nation to provide an international ice patrol in the North Atlantic and mark the location of icebergs and warn merchant shipping in the area. And so within hours, we were able to divert that aircraft and begin flying, and we flew nose to tail for the next 4 days, providing coverage on the surface of the water. The team that we assembled was guided by 3 simple principles: conduct effective search and be prepared to rescue or recover on the surface of the water, on the seabed at 3,800 meters, or in the water column. Doing so while ensuring the safety of first responders, and then keep the families and public informed as to our actions. These 3 simple principles guided our response over the next 4 days. And while the guidance was simple, the task was by no means easy. As the international story took shape, there were plenty of pundits that came out to question and criticize every move that we made from the initial response. But what was lost in that discussion was how complex the logistics were of getting the equipment to the scene and operating at depth there. We were very lucky to have a strong partner in Pelagic Research Services and Mr. Ed Casano, who were mobilized very early on in the response and began moving their remote operated vehicle, the Odysseus, to the site. And when you heard the pundits talk about there's not enough ROVs there, or you heard other folks within government calling for more ROVs, let me just give you a little bit of an illustration of how difficult this challenge was. So for that one remote operated vehicle, again, there's only a handful of these worldwide. We found it in New York. We loaded it. It took 3 C-17s, Air Force C-17s, to supply all of the gear that was needed to run that single vessel. It was then flown to St. John's, Newfoundland, where it was met by the Canadian Coast Guard and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It was streamlined through customs clearance, loaded into with tractor trailers, and delivered to the port, where it was welded to the deck of a waiting ship to be transferred out to the Titanic site. These people worked round the clock from the go, welding through the night and fabricating the necessary support mechanisms so that the Odysseus could be effective in its operation. On Thursday morning, Odysseus arrived on scene at the Titanic and descended quickly to the last known position of the Titan capsule. Shortly after reaching the seabed, we found what we had hoped that we would not see. And so let me show you what the first images that came up from Odysseus as we were gathered around on Thursday morning. Again, because of the time distance problem involved, any decision that we took, it was a minimum of 36 hours before we could have somebody out on the surface of the water effecting an action. And so once we got Odysseus loaded and underway, we spent the next 24 hours to 30 hours just going through every particular plan that we had, every contingency operation. But unfortunately, this was the end result of Odysseus's dive. We saw the wreckage of the Titan capsule. We first talked to the families and let them know what we had found, and then we notified the public through the media. And while it was a difficult day for everybody involved, I remain inspired by the ingenuity, by the relentless determination, and the unwavering hope that everybody in this search and rescue, ultimately search and recovery operation displayed throughout. So let me talk about the investigation. Shortly after we identified the wreckage, the Coast Guard launched a Marine Board of Inquiry, its highest level of investigation, to determine the cause of what happened with the Titan's implosion. The report of that investigation was released just earlier this week. It's 335 pages long and includes over 100 hours of video testimony and thousands of pages of documentation. And the story that emerges is one that is all too familiar in the maritime domain. The maritime domain covers nearly 3/5 of the Earth's surface, and it remains a haven for illegal and unlawful activity that goes on out there. There are regulatory seams that happen out in the middle of the ocean, and Titan was no exception. The operators of the Titan exploited these seams to make sure that this experimental craft or this novel craft didn't fall in under any regulatory categories, that the people on board were classified as mission specialists, vice passengers, to evade any of those regulations. At the same time, the carbon fiber hull that made up this particular vessel had inherent flaws built into the carbon fiber construction. And the active monitoring that was used to determine whether or not the hull was failing or at risk of failing, the warning signs coming off of that active monitoring system were ignored. And so the lessons that we can draw from this apply to the maritime industry as a whole, and particularly to the issue of maritime cybersecurity. But why do we care about this? We care about this because 90% of the world's trade comes through the maritime transportation system. Here in the US, it provides $5.4 trillion of economic value each year because of the goods that are shipped, both coming into the US and the goods that we're able to ship going out of the US. And so this isn't a niche problem. This is a real issue for our economy and for our national security. And at the same time, the maritime industry is driving to become increasingly more connected. 5.0 is about floating networks at sea that are relying on continuous high bandwidth data streams coming on and off the ship, both to ensure the efficient operation of the vessel, but also to open up new opportunities for businesses out on the water. And what we know is that our maritime cybersecurity is not keeping pace with the rapid connection of these ships. There's both this international regulatory gaps, and there's also cultural issues. I think most people think when a ship goes to sea, it's left out alone to voyage the crew in the ship to handle whatever comes up to them. But these are increasingly extensions of the offices back ashore because of the level of connectivity. And so what do the experts say? The experts say, hey, there's problems out there. First of all, there is no air gap on board ships anymore because the IT and the OT connections are inherently connected and back through the data and satellite streams that are keeping these ships connected. And it's gotten to the point, too, now that we've seen ransomware attacks that have affected the operation of ships it's not just a problem that happens ashore, but it's a problem that's happening afloat as well. And while the cost of these breaches keeps going up, it's not been enough to drive behavior. And so what are some of the vulnerabilities? Again, if we look at the expert reports and the folks that are out there surveying those ships, almost 3/4 of the assessments identified the default credentials for the protection of their networks. Half of the folks that were surveyed identified a little understanding of network segmentation and the needs to differentiate between how they connected their IT and OT networks. And while many organizations feel that their response procedures are adequate, the reality is they have not been tested. And so what can we take from what we observed during the loss of Titan and apply this to maritime cybersecurity? Again, it's about that exploitation of seams and gaps in regulations. As we sit here today, less than 1% of the world's ocean-going maritime trading fleet is covered by mandatory and enforceable maritime cybersecurity regulations. There are inherent weaknesses in the design of the containment, just as there were with Titan, because of the technology and the underlying protocols that are used to secure those networks and the lack of understanding about segmentation. And there is a limited reliance on active monitoring. We don't know how many ships are actually covered by security operations centers while they're in operation. And talking with experts over the course of the last couple of days, many think that my numbers here overestimate how many are actually covered. The number is probably even less than 20% of the world's ships are covered by security operations centers. And so if we take these lessons and apply them to the issue of maritime cybersecurity, we see that there are latent risks, just as there were on Titan, that are waiting to impact this industry. We know that our adversaries are looking forward to exploiting these risks, either for economic or national security interests. And so this weekend, we've gathered at the Maritime Hacking Village to illuminate the challenges associated with this particular problem and enlist your help. I'd encourage you to all come over to the Maritime Hacking Village where you can get on keyboard and exploit some of the systems that are being used and help us to build the quality of the profession within maritime cybersecurity. And so as I think about the Titan, the families are always first in my mind, and we will never bring back their loved ones. But I do hope that we can learn lessons from this terrible catastrophe and apply those lessons to ensure that this industry is safer and more secure. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you over at the Maritime Hacking Village.